There are places in this world where the veil between what we know and what we fear is thin. Places where the air feels heavy and the silence is louder than any scream. These are the places where the stories begin. They are not just stories told around a campfire. They are echoes of encounters, fragments of experiences that defy explanation. They linger in the dark corners of our minds, waiting. Tonight, we listen. We open ourselves to the possibility that some things are not meant to be understood. Some things are simply meant to be survived. It stood on a hill overlooking the town, its windows like vacant eyes staring out. Locals whispered about the family who vanished there decades ago. No one bought it. No one dared go near it after dark. Then, a young couple, eager for a fixer-upper, ignored the warnings. They laughed off the tales of cold spots and strange noises. They thought it was just an old, empty house. The first night, they heard scratching from inside the walls. Not mice, something heavier, more deliberate. It sounded like fingernails dragging slowly down plaster. Soon, whispers started. Low, guttural sounds that seemed to come from the air itself. They spoke names the couple didn't recognize, names from the past. Objects moved when no one was looking. Doors they swore they'd locked would be found wide open. The feeling of being watched became a constant, suffocating presence. One morning, the wife woke up to find a child's handprint on the dusty mirror. It was small, but the fingers were long and thin, pressed deep into the grime. It hadn't been there the night before. The husband tried to rationalize it, but the fear was growing. He started sleeping with the lights on. The whispers grew louder, sometimes forming coherent sentences. They spoke of the family who had lived there, of what had happened. They spoke of the basement. The couple had avoided it, sensing something deeply wrong down there. But the whispers insisted, growing more demanding, more menacing. One night, the husband went down. He didn't find bodies or blood or anything overtly horrifying. He found an empty room, colder than the rest of the house, filled with an oppressive silence. But when he came back upstairs, his wife was gone. The front door was wide open, letting in the cold night air. There was no sign of a struggle, no note, nothing. He searched the house, calling her name, his voice trembling. The only response was the return of the whispers, now louder, closer. They weren't speaking names anymore. They were laughing. He fled that night, leaving everything behind. The house still stands on the hill, its windows still staring. And sometimes, on quiet nights, people walking nearby swear they can still hear the faint sound of laughter drifting from its empty rooms. It started subtly, a flicker in peripheral vision, gone when you turned your head. A sense of not being alone in an empty room. Small things you could easily dismiss. But for Sarah, it grew. The shadow became more defined, a shape just at the edge of her sight. It was tall, thin, and seemed to absorb the light around it. It never fully entered her direct view. She'd see it behind her in reflections, a dark smudge in the glass that wasn't her own shadow. She'd feel its presence when she was alone, a cold spot in the air behind her neck. It didn't make noise, didn't touch her. It just was. Always there, always watching from the periphery. It was the constant, silent witness to her life. Sleep became difficult. She'd wake up feeling it looming over her bed, just out of sight. The feeling of dread was a physical weight on her chest. She tried everything. Sage, prayers, even therapy. Though she couldn't bring herself to fully explain what she was seeing. Nothing worked. The shadow remained. It seemed to feed on her fear. The more terrified she became, the clearer its outline grew, the closer it seemed to get to the edge of her vision. One evening, she was walking home, the streetlights casting long, distorted shadows. She saw it then, not just in her periphery, but slightly more centered. It was closer than it had ever been. It didn't have features, just that tall, dark shape. But she felt an intense, malevolent focus emanating from it. It wasn't just watching anymore. It felt like it was waiting. She ran, her heart pounding, not daring to look back. She burst into her apartment, slamming the door shut, locking it, leaning against it, gasping for breath. She stood there for a long time in the silence, listening. She heard nothing. The feeling of being watched seemed to recede slightly. maybe it was gone. Then, she looked down at the floor, just past her feet. There, cast by the hallway light seeping under the door, was a shadow. It was long and thin, but it wasn't hers. It was the wrong shape. It was waiting on the other side of the door, and she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that it wasn't going to leave. Some people hear voices in the static of old radios or televisions. They say it's just interference, random noise, but sometimes it's more. Mark collected vintage electronics. He found an old tube radio at an antique shop, the kind with a big wooden case and glowing dials. He brought it home, cleaned it up, and plugged it in. It crackled to life, filling his apartment with the warm, fuzzy sound of static. He tuned through the frequencies, finding nothing but noise, but the static itself felt different, thicker somehow. He started leaving it on at night, a low hum in the background. He began to notice patterns in the static, almost like whispers trying to break through. He dismissed it as his imagination. Then he started seeing him. In the corner of his eye, a figure standing in the static on the radio dial. It was indistinct, like a shape formed from the noise itself. It was a man, tall and thin, made of shifting black and white pixels like a bad signal. He just stood there, watching from inside the radio. Mark tried turning the radio off, unplugging it. But the static man remained, a faint, shimmering image on the dark glass of the dial. He was trapped inside, but still visible. He started hearing the whispers more clearly. They weren't words he understood, just a low, constant murmur that seemed to emanate from the radio even when it was off. The static man started moving, slowly at first, just shifting his weight. Then, he would turn his head, his pixelated face seeming to look directly at Mark. One night, Mark woke up to a deafening roar of static filling his apartment. He looked at the radio. The static man was gone from the dial. Instead, the static seemed to be pouring out of the radio, filling the room like a fog, and standing in the middle of it, no longer confined to the glass, was the static man. He was taller now, his form clearer, though still made of shifting noise. He raised a hand, and the static intensified, pressing in on Mark, filling his ears, his eyes. Mark doesn't remember what happened next. He was found days later, huddled in the corner of his apartment, catatonic. The radio was silent, unplugged. But the doctors say he still hears it, the constant, roaring static. And sometimes, when he stares blankly at a wall, they swear they can see a faint, shimmering outline just at the edge of his vision. These are just a few echoes from the other side, stories that remind us that the world is not as simple as we like to believe, that there are forces, entities, or simply phenomena that exist beyond our understanding. They wait in the dark, in the silence, in the static. They watch from the periphery, and sometimes they reach out. So, when you're alone in the dark and you hear a sound that shouldn't be there, or feel a presence you can't explain, remember these stories. Remember that some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed. Thank you for watching.